New details about a deadly shooting in Columbus, leaving a young woman dead and her husband injured from a gunshot wound. The shooting happened around 4 o'clock this morning on Gardner Drive near Floyd Road. News Center and I's Alexis Thornton joining us now live from our newsroom. And Alexis, you spoke to the Muskogee County coroner, so what did he tell you about the details in this case?
Multiple gunshot wounds. Antrom husband was also shot and is being treated at a hospital.
I want you to picture something for a moment. Picture a young woman, a mother, sitting at home with her 2 boys, trying to figure out life, trying to hold it all together, and still somehow finding the energy to dream about a future. That woman was Lexus Antrom. And before we talk about how she died, I think it is only right that we talk about how she lived. Because she deserves that. Her story deserves more than just a headline. Lexus grew up in Columbus, Georgia, a city that sits right along the Alabama border. She was raised in a close family, the kind of family that stayed connected, the kind that actually showed up for each other. And Lexus, she was at the center of that. Her mother, Tanisha Seals, once described her daughter as the person everyone called when things got difficult. When family members argued, they called Lexus. When someone needed to talk through a problem, they called Lexus. She had that gift, the ability to walk into a hard situation and somehow make people feel heard. She was outgoing. She spoke her mind without apology. She was protective of the people she loved. And she was funny, warm, the kind of person you remember long after you've left the room. She also had dreams that stretched beyond her daily life. Her mother said Lexus wanted to act. She wanted to be creative, to express herself on a bigger stage. She had that fire in her, that belief that life could be more than what it was right now. But more than anything, more than the dreams and the plans and the ambitions, Lexus was a mother. She had 2 sons, a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old. And those 2 boys were everything to her. Her days were built around them: school pickups, meals, bedtime, the small, ordinary moments that add up to a whole life. She was not a perfect person. None of us are. But by every account from the people who knew her, she loved her children with everything she had. Her family also carried a painful history. Years before Lexus was born, her grandparents had died in a murder-suicide. That kind of tragedy leaves a mark on a family that never fully fades. It makes you aware. It makes you careful. It makes you think you know what danger looks like. But sometimes danger does not look the way you expect it to. Sometimes it looks like someone you already know. Someone already inside your home. That is the hardest part of this story to sit with. Not just what happened, but how close it was. How ordinary it all seemed before it wasn't. Lexus Antrom had 2 sons, a mother who loved her, and a future she was still building. She deserved to see it. And she never got the chance. Now, I need you to stay with me here because this part of the story is where things start to get complicated. And in true crime, complicated is usually where the truth lives. His name was Kevon Davenport. He was 22 years old, and he lived in the same home as Lexus Antrom. The 2 of them were in a relationship, an intimate one. They shared a space, shared a life in the way that people do when they are together. Not much has been released publicly about Kevon's upbringing or background. Investigators kept those details close. But what we do know is this: he and Lexus had a relationship that was not always peaceful. Family members later confirmed that the 2 of them argued. That is not unusual on its own. Relationships have conflict, couples fight. But the arguments between Lexus and Kevon had a weight to them. There was tension there that went beyond ordinary disagreements. At one point, Kevon actually reached out to Lexus's mother, Tanisha Seals. He approached her and talked about the problems he and Lexus were having. He came to her respectfully, asking for perspective, looking for some kind of guidance. Tanisha listened. She took it seriously. But she also had no idea, no way of knowing, how far things had already gone. That is the thing about these situations. From the outside, it looks like a couple going through a rough patch. It looks manageable. It looks like something that can be worked through with time, or a hard conversation, or some space. Nobody in that family was sitting around thinking that Lexus was in danger for her life. They were worried, yes, but not like that. And that gap between what a family knows and what is actually happening behind closed doors, that gap is where so many of these tragedies live. Domestic violence does not announce itself. It does not send a warning ahead of time. It builds slowly, quietly, until one night it does not build anymore. It just explodes. People who study these patterns will tell you that the warning signs are usually there if you know what to look for. Escalating arguments, jealousy, a need for control, emotional conflicts that start bleeding into something more dangerous. But when you are on the inside of a relationship, or on the outside looking in at someone you love, those signs are easy to miss, easy to explain away, easy to convince yourself are not as serious as they feel. Tunisia Seals would later tell reporters that she wished she had known, that if she had understood how serious things had become, she would have done something. She would have stepped in. She would have acted. But she did not know. And Lexus did not leave. And Kevon Davenport stayed in that house. And on the night of February 12, 2026, all of it came to a head. February 12, 2026. It was a Thursday, early morning. The kind of hour when most of the world is still asleep and everything feels still and far away. On Gardner Drive in Columbus, Georgia, the neighborhood was quiet. Porch lights were off. Cars were parked. Nothing about that street, in that moment, told you that something terrible was about to happen. But inside one home, the residence on the 4500 block of Gardner Drive, something was already happening. An argument had started between Lexus Antrom and Kevon Davenport. We do not know exactly what triggered it. Investigators have not released the specific details of what was said or how it began. What we know is that by the time it was over, one person was dead and another was wounded, and two little boys had watched it all happen. At 4:03 in the morning, emergency calls started coming in. Gunshots had been fired inside the home. Columbus police officers responded quickly. When they arrived and entered that residence, they found Lexus Antrom on the ground, unresponsive, with a gunshot wound. She was not moving. She could not be reached. Kevon Davenport was also in the home, and he too had a gunshot wound. How Davenport came to be shot has never been fully explained publicly by investigators. That detail remains unclear. What is not unclear is what happened to Lexus. Emergency medical personnel arrived and assessed the situation. There was nothing they could do for her. The Muskogee County coroner, Buddy Bryan, arrived at the residence, and at 4:50 in the morning, just 47 minutes after that first call was made, he pronounced Lexus Antrom dead. 47 minutes. That is all the time that passed between the world finding out something was wrong and Lexus being declared gone. In those 47 minutes, she went from a mother in her own home to a homicide case. Her children were in that house. They were there when the gun went off. They were there in the aftermath. A 7-year-old and a 13-year-old, inside the same walls where their mother had just been killed. I want you to sit with that for a second, because that detail, those two children being present, is one of the heaviest parts of this entire story. They did not get to be protected from it. They did not get to find out gently the next morning, with the right words and the right people around them. They were there. They saw it. And that is something they will carry for the rest of their lives. The crime scene was secured. The neighborhood that had been so quiet just an hour before was now lit up with police lights and yellow tape. Investigators were called in. And the work of figuring out exactly what happened inside that home and what it would mean for everyone involved was only just beginning. When a homicide is confirmed, the case does not stay with the first officers on the scene. It moves up. It gets handed to people whose entire job is to find out the truth and build a case that holds up in a court of law. In Columbus, that meant the Violent Crimes Unit of the Columbus Police Department took over. These are detectives who work cases like this every day. They know what to look for. They know how to read a scene. And they got to work. They went through that house on Gardner Drive with careful, deliberate attention. Every room was photographed. Every surface was examined. They were looking for the firearm. They were looking for shell casings. They were looking for forensic evidence, the kind of physical proof that tells you a story even when no one is talking. They also spoke to anyone who might have heard or seen something. Neighbors. People who may have been awake at that hour. anyone who could help fill in the gaps. And as the evidence came together, the picture became clearer. Detectives determined that the shooting had taken place during the domestic dispute between Lexus and Kevon. They determined there was enough probable cause to move forward. The decision was made. Kevon Davenport would be charged. 2 charges were filed: murder and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. At the time the charges were announced, Davenport was still in the hospital, still being treated for the gunshot wound he had suffered that night. Police made clear that the moment he was discharged from Piedmont Columbus Regional Hospital, he would be transferred directly to the Muskogee County Jail. There would be no gap. No freedom waiting for him on the other side of those hospital doors. The arrest warrants were issued. The case was on record. Now, this is where I want to be honest with you about something. Charges being filed is not the end of the road. It is actually just the beginning of a long legal process. There will be court appearances. There will be hearings. There may be a grand jury. And eventually, if the case goes to trial, a jury of 12 people will sit in a room and decide what Kevon Davenport's future looks like. Under Georgia law, a murder conviction can carry life in prison. It can carry life without the possibility of parole. In the most serious circumstances, it can even carry the death penalty. What happens in this specific case will depend on what is presented in that courtroom, the evidence, the witnesses, the arguments made on both sides. But for Tunisia Seals, for the family of Lexus Antrom, the legal process is not abstract. It is personal. It is the only path left to them. Because the person they loved is gone, and the only thing they can ask for now is that the system does what it is supposed to do. They are waiting for justice. And so far, the system is moving. After the police tape comes down, after the news vans leave, after the arrest is made, and the charges are filed, the world moves on. It always does. But for the people left behind, there is no moving on. There is only moving through. And that is a very different thing. Tunisia Seals, Lexus's mother, spoke to local media in the days after her daughter's death. She talked about who Lexus was: a loving mother, a caring daughter, someone who still had so much ahead of her. She said she wished she had seen the signs sooner. She said she did not know how bad things had gotten between Lexus and Kevon. And you could hear in every word she said the weight of that, the grief of losing a child, and the guilt of wondering if there was something she could have done differently. There wasn't. Not because she didn't care, but because these situations are designed to stay hidden. The danger was behind a closed door. The people who needed to know didn't know. And by the time the truth came out, it came out in the worst possible way. 2 boys, ages 7 and 13, are now growing up without their mother. They were there that night. They saw what happened. And whatever future they build from this point forward, it will be built on top of that memory. No child should carry something like that. But they do. Because they have no choice. And that is why cases like this matter. Not just as news stories. Not just as crime reports or legal proceedings. But as reminders. Real, painful, human reminders that domestic violence is not just a statistic. It is a mother in Columbus who wanted to act. It is 2 little boys who deserve to grow up with her. It is a family that now has to figure out how to keep going without one of the most important people in it. Lexus Antrom was known for bringing people together. She was the one they called when things got hard. She was the peacemaker, the listener, the one who stayed in the room when everyone else wanted to walk out. And now the room is empty. Her case has joined the long and heartbreaking list of lives cut short by domestic violence, a crisis that does not take a day off, that does not care what neighborhood you live in, that reaches into ordinary homes and tears them apart from the inside. If you are watching this and something in this story feels familiar, if you recognize the tension, the arguments that get louder, the fear that hides behind closed doors, please reach out. Talk to someone. There is always a way out before it becomes a night like February 12th. Lexus Antrom deserved more time. Her sons deserved more years with their mother. And the only thing we can do now from the outside is remember her and make sure her story means something. Rest, Lexus. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, hit that like button, and turn on notifications for more crimes videos.